The rain poured heavily that night, drumming loudly on the roof of the black luxury SUV that had skidded off the mountain road. Inside, a man groaned in pain, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, face pale with agony. That man was Liu Ziyan, the youngest and most powerful CEO in the city, known for his cold, calculating mind and ruthless business tactics. People feared him, respected him, but no one really knew him, and certainly no one had ever seen him this helpless. The accident had come out of nowhere, brakes failing, wheels spinning, the car flipping once before crashing down the slope. He had crawled out, barely able to move, his phone smashed, and no signal in sight. The thick woods around him were silent, except for the occasional thunder rolling in the distance. He didn't expect anyone to come. Who would even find him out here? But then, a small pair of feet stepped into the muddy path. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, wearing a bright yellow raincoat that seemed almost to glow in the darkness. Her hair was tied in 2 small buns, and she held a tiny umbrella shaped like a cartoon frog. She stood there, looking at him calmly, as if it was completely normal to find an injured man deep in the forest at night. Liu Ziyan blinked through the rain. Was he hallucinating? "You're hurt," she said softly. Her voice was light but confident, not the scared tone you'd expect from a child. He tried to wave her away, but the pain shot through his leg, and he gasped. "Little girl, it's dangerous here. Go home. I'll call for help. You don't have a phone, and you won't last the night like this." His eyes widened. Before he could respond, she was already kneeling beside him, her small hands brushing over his swollen leg. Her fingers were warm, strangely warm. "What are you doing?" He winced. "Healing you?" Liu Ziyan almost laughed despite the pain. "What?" She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and pressed her palm gently over the fracture. And then something happened. Something he couldn't explain. A soft golden glow shimmered around her hand, and his leg, which had been throbbing in unbearable pain, suddenly began to ease. The swelling visibly reduced. The sharp ache dulled into a faint pressure. He stared, speechless, heart thudding not from fear, but disbelief. By the time she opened her eyes again, the worst of the pain had vanished. He could bend his knee slightly. It wasn't perfect, but it felt possible. What did you just do?" She stood up and brushed the mud off her coat. "I fixed what I could. You'll be able to walk to the cabin now. It's just up the trail." Cabin? He was still trying to process what just happened. "My home," she said simply. He looked around. There was no sign of a path, no sign of lights, just trees and darkness. "I don't understand. Who are you?" She tilted her head slightly, like she was thinking. "People call me Lele. Some say I'm a miracle. Others call me a freak." And then she turned and began walking. Something inside him told him to follow. Despite the confusion, the shock, and the rain, he forced himself up, using a branch for support, limping after the girl. The trail she had mentioned was barely visible, more like a worn footpath between trees, and yet she walked it like she had done it 1,000 times before, never slipping, never hesitating. After what felt like forever, a soft light appeared ahead. A small wooden cabin came into view, smoke rising from its chimney, warmth spilled out through its windows. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. He followed. The cabin was surprisingly cozy, old-fashioned, with shelves full of herbs, jars, and scrolls. It smelled of incense and something earthy, soothing. An older woman looked up from the hearth. Her eyes immediately landed on him, and then on Lele. "You brought someone," she said, not surprised. "He needed help," Lele replied. and then plopped down on a stool, swinging her legs like any normal kid. The woman nodded. "Sit down, sir. I'll make tea." Lucian sat, but his mind raced. This little girl, Lele, had somehow reduced the swelling in his leg with a touch. He wasn't imagining it. He could feel the difference. But how? Who was she really? And what was this place? "You're lucky," the older woman said as she poured tea. "Lele doesn't help just anyone." He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "So what is she? A healer? A doctor?" The woman smiled softly. "She's special. We don't have words that quite explain it." "I need answers," he said firmly. "This isn't normal." The woman met his gaze, then looked over at Lele, who had curled up on a blanket with a book. "Sometimes the world gives us gifts we don't deserve. Lele is one of them." Lucian didn't respond. His whole world, made of logic, business, and cold facts, was suddenly bending into something unexplainable. That night, as the storm howled outside, he lay on a makeshift bed in the corner, his leg wrapped neatly, a warm compress tied over it. He watched the child who had healed him with nothing more than a touch, sleeping peacefully by the fire. He had come close to death and been saved by a girl who didn't belong in any world he understood. But what he didn't know was this was just the beginning, because Lele hadn't just healed his leg. She had seen something inside him, something broken long before the accident. And now that she had entered his life, nothing would ever be the same. The morning after his miraculous recovery, Lucian awoke to find the cabin eerily quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving a thick mist swirling outside, but he could still feel the tension in the air. His leg, though not fully healed, was far better than it had been the night before. The pain was a dull throb now, easily manageable. He couldn't deny the fact that Lele's touch had done something no hospital or doctor had been able to. As he sat up, trying to shake off the lingering fog of confusion, he noticed Lele and the woman who had greeted him last night moving around the room, preparing something. The older woman, whom he now realized was probably Lele's guardian, or perhaps her grandmother, was busy grinding herbs into a small mortar. The girl, however, had disappeared again. "Where's she?" Lucian asked, still unsure of what to make of the situation. The woman looked at him, her eyes carrying a weight of experience he couldn't quite place. "Lele is special, Mr. Liu. She's not like other children." That was an understatement, Lucian thought, but he said nothing. "You're wondering why she healed you, aren't you?" The woman continued, as if reading his thoughts. "I know you're a businessman. You deal in facts, numbers, and logic. But with Lele, you need to understand something different." Lucian's patience was beginning to fray. "I'm not asking for a fairy tale. I need answers. Who is she? What does she want with me?" The woman's gaze softened, but there was something else in her eyes. Sadness, perhaps even fear. She sighed deeply, setting the mortar aside and slowly walking over to him. Lele didn't ask for this life. No one does. But sometimes the world makes a choice, and we have to live with it. "Live with what?" Lucian pressed, his voice tinged with frustration. His entire life had been controlled by rules. His father's expectations, the weight of his company, the constant power struggles. He wasn't used to being in the dark, especially when he felt as if he were standing at the edge of something huge. The truth is, Lele is not just any child. She has the ability to heal, to bring people back from the brink of death. But it's not without a cost. The woman paused, as if considering how much to reveal. Every time she heals, part of her soul is given away. It's why she can't help everyone, why she's so careful. She carries a burden that's heavier than anyone can imagine. Lu Xian was silent for a long time, the pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind, but not quite making sense. What do you mean? Given away? She's a child. The woman nodded solemnly. Her gift comes from a place of unimaginable power, but it's also cursed. The more she heals, the closer she gets to losing herself completely. For the first time, Lu Xian's mind began to clear. The tension that had been building in, his chest started to loosen. He could see it now, the deeper mystery. The girl wasn't just special. She was dangerous, not to others, but to herself. But that didn't explain why she'd healed him, why she'd saved him when no one else could. He wasn't anyone important. He wasn't a hero, just a ruthless businessman who cared about power, profit, and control. What was it about him that had made her choose to heal him? I don't understand, Lu Xian said quietly, more to himself than to the woman. Why me? Before the woman could respond, the door to the cabin suddenly burst open. Lei Lei walked in, holding a basket of freshly picked herbs. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You're up, she said softly, and there was a strange mix of warmth and distance in her voice. I brought you breakfast. You're going to need your strength. Lei Lei, he began, his voice cautious. Why did you heal me? You don't even know me. She placed the basket down on the table and turned to face him. There was something about the way she looked at him now, something almost grown up in her eyes, despite her childlike face. I healed you because you needed it, she said simply, and because you're not just any businessman. You're someone who's lost, just like me. Her words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He had always prided himself on being strong, on never showing weakness. But Lei Lei's words, simple yet so cutting, struck a chord deep within him. It was true. He had spent his life building walls, burying feelings of guilt, regret, and loneliness beneath a cold exterior. He had let ambition consume him, and now he was surrounded by enemies, not allies. He had everything: money, power, respect. But he felt like he had nothing. You can sense that? He asked, more to himself than to her. Lei Lei nodded, slowly. People like you hide your pain behind all the things you think you can control. But you can't control everything. The weight of her words hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Lu Xian's mind raced. He had been in control of every situation for years. But now, in the presence of this little girl, the one thing he couldn't control, his own emotions, was unraveling. But there was something else lurking behind that feeling, something darker, something even more dangerous than his own vulnerability. His phone buzzed on the table. Without thinking, he grabbed it, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the name. On the screen, it was his father. Before he could answer, Lei Lei's voice cut through the tension in the room. You need to be careful, Mr. Lu. Your past is coming for you. Her warning felt like a cold gust of wind. His father, the family, business, the endless expectations, all of it was closing in on him. He stood abruptly, his pulse quickening. I don't have time for this, he muttered. But as he reached for the door, something in the air shifted. The cabin seemed darker somehow, and the ground beneath his feet felt unstable. There was something about Lei Lei's words, something. She wasn't telling him, and for the first time, Lu Xian felt like he was losing control. A loud crash interrupted his thoughts. It came from outside, the sound of shattering glass. It wasn't just a storm. Someone was here, and they were coming for him. The sound of shattered glass echoed through the cabin, followed by a heavy thud. Lu Xian's heart raced as he rushed toward the door, fear and confusion gripping him. He swung it open, only to be met with the sight of two figures standing in the mist outside. dark, imposing shapes that seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. The air around them crackled with tension. "Mr. Liu, I think you've made a dangerous enemy," the woman from the cabin whispered, her voice barely audible as she stepped up beside him. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with alarm. "This isn't just about you anymore. They came for her. Lei Lei." The realization hit him like a freight train. These people weren't here for him. They were here for the girl. "Who are they?" Lu Xian demanded. But before the woman could respond, the figures stepped forward. One of them, a tall man dressed in black, spoke with an icy calmness that sent a chill down his spine. "We've come for the child," the man said flatly. "She's too powerful to be left unchecked." The air felt heavy with threat as the two figures moved closer. Their eyes locked onto Lei Lei, who stood beside Lu Xian, her small body suddenly rigid with fear. The woman stepped forward, shielding the girl with her own frail frame. "You'll have to go through me first," the woman said, her voice surprisingly strong. But there was no hiding the fear in her eyes. She knew the stakes. She knew what these people could do. The tall man didn't even flinch. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black object. It was a syringe, gleaming with a cold promise. "We don't want to hurt her. We just need to neutralize her abilities before they destroy everything." Lu Xian's mind whirled. He had seen power plays, corporate betrayals, and ruthlessness in his career, but nothing had prepared him for this. These people, whoever they were, knew about Lei Lei's gift, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop her. In that moment, he realized something profound. This wasn't about business. This wasn't about control. This was about life, and the forces that sometimes conspired to strip it away. And for the first time in years, Lu Xian felt a stirring inside him, not of fear, but of something stronger. The need to protect. Without thinking, he stepped forward, placing himself between Lei Lei and the two strangers. "If you think you can take her, you'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice steady, despite the pounding of his heart. The tall man narrowed his eyes, but didn't move. "You don't understand. We've been ordered to bring her in. It's not personal." Lu Xian's mind raced. He wasn't a fighter. He had no skills for this kind of confrontation, but something inside him knew this wasn't just about a battle of strength. This was about survival, and most importantly, this was about a child who had shown him something he had long forgotten. "Hope. Lei Lei," he said softly, turning to the girl. "You don't have to do this alone. We'll protect you. I'll protect you." The girl's eyes flickered, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she stepped forward, her tiny hand reaching up to touch Lu Xian's arm. "I have to stop them," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "But I can't do it without you." Lu Xian's heart skipped a beat as he realized the weight of her words. She wasn't just a child. She was a force that could heal and destroy in equal measure. But she didn't want to destroy. She wanted to protect. And in that moment, he understood the true cost of her gift. Before he could say anything else, the woman stepped in front of Lei Lei, her face set with a determined expression. "You don't have to carry this burden alone, little one," she said, placing a hand on Lei Lei's shoulder. "We will find another way." The tall man raised his eyebrows, clearly taken aback by the woman's defiance. He seemed to weigh his options for a moment, then slowly withdrew the syringe. "We'll be back," he said, his voice laced with warning. "This isn't over." With that, the two figures turned and disappeared into the mist, leaving the cabin in silence. The tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lu Xian looked down at Lei Lei, his heart pounding in his chest. The girl had saved him, but now it was his turn to protect her. He couldn't let these people take her. He couldn't let her sacrifice herself. Not for him, not for anyone. The woman, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke again. "We have to move quickly. They won't stop coming until they've neutralized her. It's only a matter of time before they find us again. I won't let them take her," Lu Xian said firmly. "I don't care who they are. They won't get to her." As the rain began to fall heavier, the three of them turned and hurried inside. But Lu Xian knew one thing for sure. His life had changed forever. The business deals, the endless meetings, the corporate wars, none of it mattered now. His fight was no longer about power or wealth. It was about a little girl, a miracle doctor, and a world that would stop at nothing to control her. And as he looked down at Lei Lei, standing there with a mix of fear and hope in her eyes, he made a silent promise. No matter what it took, he would protect her. He would face whatever dangers came their way. Because for the first time in his life, Lu Xian understood what it truly meant to care for someone. It wasn't about control. It was about love. The journey ahead was uncertain, the threats still looming, but one thing was clear. Their fight had only just begun. And whatever came next, they would face it together,